Honorable members, distinguished delegates, fellow patriots. It's really an honor to speak to a room where the words sovereignty, identity, and civilization still matters. We are gathered here not just as representatives of nations, but as guardians of cultures that refuse to be erased by Islamist radicalism, ideological globalism, or cultural nihilism. I stand before you today not merely as a spokesperson of the world's largest political party, the Bharatiya Janata Party, but as a representative of a civilizational awakening that is taking place in the oldest continuous culture in the world, India, or as we call it, Bharat. In this context, my friends, I will talk about Modi's India. This is a nation rediscovering its civilizational soul, confronting threats without apology, embracing an identity-based modernity that some in the West are only now beginning to discover. Yes, I'm a Muslim woman in the Indian right, and I address this forum as not just a member of the, as I said earlier, largest party of the world, but also as a Muslim woman office bearer of the BJP, which is sometimes referred as a majoritarian, Hindu, right-winged party. My very presence here, my friends, is a living rebuttal of the global misrepresentation that the Indian right is exclusionary. I speak here both as a proud Indian and as a proud Indian Muslim woman who seeks reform within her own community, who seeks freedom from regressive orthodoxy, and yes, and a place in a modern, progressive, and culturally rooted India. I have seen how conservative clergy, the self-proclaimed custodians of faith, have stifled the aspirations of Muslim women under the guard of tradition. So it is not the left, nor the secular elite, but the Indian right that has empowered me to challenge that orthodoxy, stand for gender justice, and promote inclusive development without compromising my identity. The right in India does not demand assimilation. It demands accountability from all, religious orthodoxy and all other forces, radical Islamist, woke, and others that threaten our cultural sovereignty or the idea of who we are. Under Prime Minister Narendra Modi, India is witnessing a tectonic, huge political transformation. This is not just a change of another political party. It is indeed a change of civilizational posture. My party, BJP, has received massive democratic mandate since 2014. Narendra Modi has been voted to power in this largest democracy of the world, the third consecutive time around. Minorities in my country, such as Muslims, Sikhs, Parsis, are not patronized. They are included through transparent, targeted welfare, scholarship, housing, gas, loans, and digital access. At the same time, India has ended the politics of political blackmail, where a vocal minority could derail the national consensus. Indian right wing is a civilizational movement. It is not a sectarian movement. Led by BJP, it is civilizational in outlook, and it aims to decolonize India. Decolonize India, what I mean by that is the intellectual capture and colonization through foreign intellectual frameworks, judicial and educational systems designed under the British rule, and post-independence politics that denied India her cultural self-respect. So this is not about one religion, as many would have you to believe. It is about a revival, a cultural revival, a civilizational renewal, an assertion of who we are as a people. Our movement is about remembering who we are, a civilization older than any modern state, diverse yet unified, deeply spiritual yet forward-looking. We've never had the needed or had the need to invent the idea of civilization. We are one of the world's fewest continuous civilizations, and yes, for BJP, it is not a point of nostalgia, but a source of national sovereignty. The Hindu worldview is not exclusionary, it is plural, rooted in dharma, which is the moral order of the universe. It is unapologetically civilizational and recognizes that a people cut out from their roots become easy prey to ideological subversion and poaching. So India is not, as you all know, as a nation state formed in the 20th century. It is the oldest and most resilient civilization grounded in the philosophical and ethical and spiritual traditions of Sanatan Dharma, or what many understand today as the Hindu civilizational doctrine. India, like Europe, fears and faces the destabilizing influence of transnational ideologies and actors. From the ideological hostility of Pakistan that my friend Ram just spoke about, which promotes separatism and cross-border radicalism and a state that exports terror, to the agendas of certain foreign-funded NGOs and people who call it cutely civil society, and the ideological rigidity of imported woke doctrines, we are compelled to protect our internal cohesion and national sovereignty. I want to be very clear. Civilizational states like India cannot be dictated to by those who do not understand our individual, personal, and our own cultural grammar. We reject all forms of interference, be it in the name of religion, human rights, or supranational moralizing, when it weakens our unity or distorts our democratic institutions. I observe in parts of Europe a growing resistance to cultural erasure. In France, Italy, Hungary, and even Belgium, the question of who we are is being asked again. This is healthy. Identity is not xenophobic. It is the basis of meaning, belonging, and a moral obligation to oneself and to the collective subconscious of who we are. From France to Hungary, from Poland to Netherlands, there is a growing recognition that identity matters, that without cultural continuity, democracies cannot stand strong. We are witnessing a shared desire among European patriots to defend what makes their nations unique, their history, faith, language, and shared moral and ethical traditions. So today, at this point of time, as we have this wonderful conference to exchange notes from one patriot to another, I think there is room today. And we believe that there is space today, place today, and need for an agenda for a new axis, not of geography, but of values, between Indians who love India and Bharat and Europeans who love their homelands, between patriots who believe that democracy must serve the cultural majority, not be hijacked by ideological minorities. This is not a religious alliance, it is a civilizational compact to resist being deconstructed by post-national utopias or threatened by transnational jihadists. What we are witnessing today in India is not isolationism, it is a cultural renaissance, a revival of identity that is inclusive, yet firm, proud, yet open. We also find common ground in resisting radical Islamist ideology. I, as a Muslim woman, is not an Islamist. So when I say Islamist ideology, I want to make the difference between Muslims and Islamists. And there is a need to differentiate between the two. When I talk about this, I must tell you that India hosts the third largest Muslim population in the world. This might come as a surprise to many of you, but there are more Muslims in India than any of the Arab countries. So when I find common ground in resisting radical Islamist movements or ideologies, I also have a huge problem with transnational NGOs. networks, civil societies, super left media or leftist systems that do not answer to the people, but want to interfere in the workings of a state. Our message is very clear. A sovereign democracy must be rooted in its civilization. Diversity must never come at the cost of one's cultural identity. And reform, including within faith traditions, is essential for peace. So I think whether it's patriots from India or from Europe, there is a need to be culturally assertive, without shame, without any apology, and without submission to imported ideologies. We must name our threats clearly. And as an Indian speaker, I wish to talk about this. Pakistan continues to sponsor Islamist radicalism, not only across borders, but through ideological proxies within India and even in Europe. Globalist NGOs, often Western-funded, undermine sovereignty under the guise of human rights or climate justice. Transnational elites, whether in Davos or Silicon Valley, seek to rewrite human identity, erasing tradition, family, faith, and even biology. India has stood firm. We've tightened foreign funding. We've shut down extremist-linked organizations, and we have insisted that sovereignty is non-negotiable. I wish to share with you as to how BJP, the party that has been in power in India for the last 11 years and 4 more to go, under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi, how have we done this, and how is our approach unique? We have asserted the Hindu identity without falling into religious supremacy. We have protected temples, but also ensured that Muslim girls receive more scholarship than ever before. We defend national unity, but still allow for diversity of language, dress, and region. We have said no to appeasement, but yes to inclusive development under schemes like Ujjwala, which is free gas and cooking cylinders, Mudra, which is easy loans, and PM Awas, which is affordable housing. Muslims have received over 30 to 40% of total benefits in some sectors. Appeasement versus equality. So BJP's stand is very clear that it will not be appeasement. It will be equity and equality. While Muslims are 14% of India's population, the beneficiaries of Prime Minister Modi's government schemes, welfare schemes, the beneficiaries of the schemes, they are out of all the people, 30 to 40% of those are Muslims. That means clearly disproportionate to their population. Muslims are the largest beneficiaries of Prime Minister's huge governmental welfare schemes. For decades, minority identity in India was reduced to appeasement politics, practiced by the other so-called secular parties. So there are certain legislation that we've passed, and I think it's important that we talk about them. So BJP is a party that has not gone out and, as I said earlier, reached out to Muslims far more than any other party has in terms of government welfare schemes. But when it comes to education, when it comes to reform within the religion, when it comes to pernicious, orthodox, regressive practices, not permitted even in Quran, but are practiced by Muslims in India, BJP has made legislation to ensure equity and freedom and dignity to the Muslim woman. There have been the other parties which refused to modernize Muslim education, and they feared there would be a backlash from the hardliners. And they've treated the majority population as a problem to be managed, not as a partner in democracy. But the Indian right wing or the BJP believes, and I don't even think we're the right wing anymore, I think we're really at the center because we've been winning election after election, not just at the central level, but at many state levels throughout. So for us, it is no appeasement, no to discrimination, equal rights for all, special rights for none. Sabka Saath and Sabka Vishwas. Our identity is not that from a small, isolated island, but it is a lighthouse, firm in foundation, open to the sea. India has fought terrorism on its borders and its cities. Europe faces the same threat through migration networks, online and all kinds of radicalization, and separatist enclaves. We say with respect, be clear about who funds these ideologies. Do not allow political correctness to override national security. Empower reformist voices within Islam, but don't shy away from calling out those who reject your civilization and your culture. We stand with all Europeans who seek to restore what is precious, defend what is sacred, and build what is enduring. In the right, in the Indian right wing, in the BJP, I find a space for myself to be authentically Indian, unapologetically Muslim, and unafraid to challenge orthodoxy. India is rising, no, not as a theocracy, not as a clone of the West, but as Bharat, a civilizational state reclaiming its voice. Thank you so much.